Jerry, this is Jeff Hirsh live at the courthouse.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeff. You know, there had been some talk over the weekend. People were looking for some increased drama here, and I even heard this one scenario that all of a sudden the back doors would open and in would walk Pete Rose, you know, hand on the Bible, making his last plea to say, look, I never bet on baseball. Judge, give me 14 days to prove that Giamatti is in fact biased. That kind of theater is very unlikely, and what made me think about it is the fact that Dowd is not there today. In other words, they would have to tell the judge ahead of time what witnesses are going to show up. So obviously witnesses will not be there today. So I think it's going to be a cut and dry ruling one way or the other.
And there's also been a lot of talk over the weekend that perhaps Pete would hang it up today after this or whatever. But that isn't going to happen either. I think what we're going to see is a possibly long drawn out. Will depend on whether Judge Nadel grants the TRO. But it is not going to be quick and painless no matter what happens here.
This whole case has been nothing but a series of grand surprises. But Pete has stated unequivocally that regardless of what the decision is, he wants to be in baseball and he is not going to quit whatever happens. Let's now go to the courtroom where Judge Nadel apparently is getting ready to walk in. And there he is.
This court to be operating on Sunday, but I think it is clear that this is a highly unusual situation, to say the least. This is case number A8905178. It's Peter Edward Rose versus A. Bartlett Giamatti et al. Now, before we render our decision here today on the issue of whether to issue a temporary restraining order, I would just like to mention something about the attorneys involved in this case. The two lead trial counsel for the parties, Robert Stackler and Louis Hoynes, are not only great legal warriors, but they are two of the most honorable gentlemen that I have ever had the honor to work with in a very, very difficult situation. In addition, the other attorneys involved here for the plaintiff, William Seitz, Robert Pitcairn, Reuben Katz, Roger Makeley, and for the defendants, Lawrence Kamine, Jonathan Wolford, Gerald Weigel, Lawrence Ellman, Robert S. Martin, Mark McDonald, and K.C. Green, are also the highest cream of the legal crop. So perhaps it is fitting that we have such great talent in an unprecedented legal battle that may or may not be just beginning. Before we discuss specific issues involved, it should be pointed out that we are here at a very initial stage of the case. And as we all know, during the 2 days of evidence, we heard a lot of opinion, we heard a lot of hearsay testimony, and all of which, I might add, is proper at this early point. However, we did not hear from two of the key parties. That is, Peter Edward Rose and the Commissioner of Baseball, A. Bartlett Giamatti. We would like also to point out that a central issue at this time is not whether Peter Edward Rose did or did not bet on baseball, but rather we are here today deciding issues involving fairness, impartiality, and equity. I also would like to point out that any ruling that we make here today with reference to a temporary restraining order does not in any way forecast what might happen in any future hearing or proceeding before this court. In order for this court to issue a temporary restraining order, several determinations must be made, and we will begin here by making the determinations on the least difficult issues. Number one, if there is a hearing before the Commissioner of Baseball tomorrow, it is this court's judgment that the career of Peter Edward Rose will be irreparably harmed. Secondly, if we grant a delay here today of 14 days, neither Major League Baseball nor the public will be harmed. Thirdly, we must decide if we should even be here today. That is, should this court be sticking its nose into the affairs of Major League Baseball? As we all know, as counsel for all the parties very well know, courts are reluctant to interfere in matters of this sort because of the possibility that the floodgates of litigation will be opened. However, this court will never let that factor deter it from doing what is right and fair. And we now reach the most crucial and most difficult issue for this court to decide, and I might add, this issue involves the closest call for this court in this lawsuit so far. That is, has Peter Edward Rose established his claim for purposes of these proceedings that the Commissioner of Baseball is not an impartial and unbiased decision maker in baseball's proceedings against Mr. Rose? On this point, the strongest evidence for Peter Edward Rose is this letter, Exhibit G, and this is the letter that was written by the Commissioner of Baseball to Judge Carl Rubin on behalf of Ron Peters, and Ron Peters is Peter Edward Rose's chief accuser. I will now read the pertinent parts of this letter for purposes of these proceedings. And the Commissioner of Baseball to Judge Rubin says as follows: "It is my purpose to bring to your attention the significant and truthful cooperation Mr. Peters has provided to my special counsel, who is conducting the investigation into allegations concerning the conduct and activities of Pete Rose, the manager of the Cincinnati Reds Baseball Club." The Commissioner of Baseball goes on to say to Judge Rubin, "I am satisfied Mr. Peters has been candid, forthright, and truthful with my special counsel. It therefore appears to this court at this point that the Commissioner of Baseball has prejudged Peter Edward Rose. We further find that the hearing set tomorrow in New York before the Commissioner of Baseball would be futile and illusory, and the outcome a foregone conclusion. Accordingly, I here today grant Peter Edward Rose's motion for a temporary restraining order. The action I have taken here today has the following ramifications during the term of the temporary order, which is 14 days. Number one, Peter Edward Rose will not have a hearing tomorrow before the Commissioner of Baseball. Number two, no disciplinary action of any type may be taken against Mr. Rose for 14 days. Number three, Mr. Rose will remain as manager of the Cincinnati Reds in their employment for the next 14 days. In addition, the court hereby sets this matter for hearing on plaintiff's request for a preliminary injunction on July 6, 1989 at 10 a.m. And the court at this time would like to file the temporary restraining order with the clerk, Mr. Dafford. And here's an extra copy. Here are copies for counsel. Very well, the record should indicate we have now filed the temporary restraining order with the clerk. If counsel wishes to take up any other matters of scheduling, I will be available in chambers. I will only be available in chambers to counsel, to my staff, that is, my court reporter, Mrs. Womack, my constable, Mrs. O'Mara, or Mr. Donovan, my bailiff, or Mr. Dafford, the clerk. Very well, at this time, Mr. Donovan, if you would adjourn court.
And there you have it. Judge Nadel has just granted the temporary restraining order requested by Pete Rose's lawyers. That means the big meeting that was supposed to happen tomorrow in New York City between Pete and Bart Giamatti will not happen. Pete's lawyers asked it to be blocked because they say Giamatti has already made up his mind and cannot be fair to Pete. And apparently Judge Nadel has found reason to go along with that decision. And
the reasons being that he feels that Bart Giamatti has prejudged Pete. That is the major reason that he gave.
We should also point out that what he said, however, does not necessarily mean how he will rule on July 6th when the preliminary injunction hearing will be held. But for now, Pete Rose is still the manager of the Cincinnati Reds and must remain so for another 14 days. So now the judge has 2 weeks in which he must decide which action he will take ultimately, whether to issue a permanent injunction, and that will be the official decision banning Giamatti from the Rose investigation. But of course, baseball could appeal that decision. Tell you what, let's go to Jeff Hirsh, who's now standing by outside the courtroom. Jeff, what do you think?
Well, Jerry, the other day when Judge Nadel took this under advisement, he said that this case could put him into previously uncharted waters. Well, what happened today was he stuck his toe into those previously uncharted waters and then dove in head first. This is truly an historic decision, even though it postpones the real decision for just a couple of weeks. The key argument to baseball's case was not necessarily whether it had or had not the evidence against Pete Rose as of this time, but rather baseball historically has been able to operate on its own and do its own internal discipline. This, at least for now, has been put on hold. There were a whole lot of Reds fans here, Pete Rose fans, I should say, one of them sitting right next to me, a gentleman named Rick Carr, who was here the other day. You weren't even in the courtroom. You were sitting out here watching it. What is your reaction to what happened?
They wouldn't let us in, but from outside watching on the monitors, I'm thrilled to death. Pete, we're all Pete Rose fans here, and I think he needed this restraining order, and I think it's good for him and good for baseball.
Do you feel that Bart Giamatti is prejudiced against Pete Rose, or do you feel you heard John Dowd's evidence, you've read it? Do you feel that Pete Rose did some things he shouldn't have done?
I feel that the letter basically says that Giamatti is already made his judgment, and I'm still sticking on. It's hard with all the Dowd's evidence to stick on Rose's side, but I'm going to, because of what he said about putting his hand on the Bible and saying that, you know, he wants to get up there and testify that he'll be coaching the Reds for the next 10 years. So.
Well, he will be managing the Reds at least for the next 2 weeks. What happens after that, we don't know. There will be another hearing in 2 weeks. The key to Judge Nadel's decision was the letter that Bart Giamatti wrote to Judge Rubin, in which he said that Ron Peters, Pete Rose's chief accuser, had given candid and truthful information. Now, you saw Steve Farr's story a few minutes ago where he interviewed Frank DeFord, who did a very highly laudatory profile of Giamatti in Sports Illustrated a few weeks ago, and even Frank DeFord admitted that he thought that letter was a mistake. That was the key that Pete Rose's lawyers hit on. They spent an hour and a half going over that with John Dowd. Dowd defended himself, defended the letter, but basically that was the letter that hung it up. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks. This is Jeff Hirsh live at the courthouse.
Jeff, let me just try something, and I don't know if it's going to work. I see behind you Bill Cunningham standing. I understand Bill Cunningham spoke with Pete Rose this weekend. If you could, can you see him behind you? If you can just grab him.
Okay.
Just let me ask him one question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay.
I'll relay the question.
Okay, I understand that he spoke to Pete Rose over the weekend rather extensively about what may or may not happen. I'd like to get his reaction to what Pete's going to do now.
Jerry asked that apparently you did talk to Pete over the weekend, and based on what he said then and what you've heard today, what do you think the reaction of Pete is? It's obviously he'd be happy, but what were his feelings going into this?
I think he was cautiously optimistic. He believed that this judge, under these circumstances in this building, where this building's located, and considering who Pete Rose is, would grant the TRO. And you and I have been around the courthouse for a while, and I think you and I understand that this particular judge is particularly sensitive to the wishes of the voters and or the fans.
Well, is this a classic case of the home field advantage? If this lawsuit was in federal court, let's say even in Cincinnati or in New York where Major League Baseball is located, would this not have happened the way it happened today? Oh, you can only guess, but is it a good guess?
Jeff and Jerry, Norma, you could line up 100 law professors, judges, lawyers. The vote would have been 99-1, and that one is the one that counts. Considered legal opinions would be that there is no way this judge can grant on these legal issues this particular relief. But as he said, this is a terribly unusual case. This is Pete Rose, and I think this judge would be hard-pressed not to grant the TRO because of his character and the kind of turmoil this city has gone through and the kind of personality of Pete Rose. And I think Pete asked for 14 days. He gave him about 11. And now the hearing in a couple of weeks will be dramatic. Giamatti's going to have to testify. Pete Rose, well, I spoke to Pete Rose's lawyers just before the proceeding, and they said Pete Rose would testify at the preliminary injunction hearing. We have all the issues of Mrs. Schott, of Steve Schott. We have the issues involving the complaint. As you know, and as Jerry knows, he's a lawyer, you can join the preliminary injunction with the trial on the merits. And one of the issues in the complaint is whether Pete Rose bet on baseball. And that could be the issue in 2 weeks, but you don't know. It depends how he limits it. But right now, the drama has just begun in this case.
Yeah, that's indeed the case. You know, people have referred to something like this as a media circus, and indeed it has been. But if Pete Rose and Bart Giamatti testify, this has just been a little carnival. The circus is yet to come. This is Jeff Hirsh live at the Hamilton County Courthouse.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeff. We may be getting back to you later on as we continue our coverage on what is a dramatic development. Norma?
No, we sent News 5's Michael Collins out to get some reaction from the baseball fans. He's live at a pregame brunch going on right now at Barleycorn's, the yacht club in Newport. Mike, they just saw the rulings. What's being said there?
Well, Norma, you know, it goes without saying that Pete has helped put this city on the map, and he's part of us. And I think if you've noticed over the last couple of months, the national media has really pointed out that the people in Cincinnati have really put blinders on when it comes to Pete Rose and this entire controversy, that we've, you know, ignored the evidence and just stood behind Pete when things were saying that Pete was gambling. We've talked to some people here today, and they're not surprised by what they've just heard and seen on the television as far as the hearing goes. Is that right?
That's right.
Why not?
I'm not surprised, because in Cincinnati he couldn't lose. He just can't lose. Other than Cincinnati, he would have lost.
We talked before, and you're not surprised at the allegations either, are you?
No, I think Pete Rose is guilty. I don't have any doubt that he's guilty. I just don't see a person not being who bets football, basketball, track, goes to the racetrack. He also bets baseball.
What do you think?
He deserves a fair chance. I mean, he is guilty of gambling, but he shouldn't be penalized the rest of his life for baseball. Everybody makes mistakes. He deserves a fair chance to tell his side of the story.
There's been a couple of polls over the last couple of days asking whether or not Pete should resign. And they seem to be split right down the middle. Some people say he should, some people say he shouldn't. What do you think?
I think he should stick with it and fight the game. I believe all the pro athletes are involved in things like this, and everybody for his own.
Were you surprised when all these allegations came out?
Yes, I was. I think he's a phenomenal baseball player, and I think that he should have his chance to vindicate himself, though, even though these allegations have been put into the public eye.
Very quickly, one more question. Do you think he would have been prejudged had he gone to that hearing tomorrow with Giamatti?
He would have been out of baseball after tomorrow.
Yes, he would have, most definitely.
Some fan reactions, very just. Pete Rose is part of Cincinnati. Norma, Jerry?
All right, a lot of people with a lot of diverse opinions on this subject. Now, we've asked an expert in sports law to join us now for some perspective on all of this.
And Ed Goggin joins us again from Chase Law School. Ed, you surprised?
Not really, because I thought there was enough in the record to justify the decision.
I'm sorry.
Excuse us,
let me interrupt you one more second.
Okay.
I just got word. Let's go back to Jeff at the courthouse. Jeff?
We have Robert Stackler here, Pete Rose's lawyer.
That we've made up our mind about Pete Rose's guilt or innocence. What would you like to tell them?
I think those people would like to see Pete Rose get a fair hearing on that issue before an impartial decision maker. And the reason we didn't put on any evidence regarding betting in this hearing, that wasn't the issue. The issue here was whether we were entitled to a hearing before a fair and impartial decision maker, whether Commissioner Giamatti was a fair and impartial decision maker, and the document that he signed is clear and unambiguous that he prejudged the charges made against
Flat out, John Dowd says his evidence has Pete Rose betting. Did Pete Rose bet on baseball?
When would you be able to put on your case?
The ball game.
What are you going to tell him now? You're going to be in touch with him.
The ball game is beginning right now.
Did Pete bet on baseball?
Pardon me.
Did Pete Rose bet on baseball? Well, as you can see, it's chaos here, and Mr. Stackler's trying to get out of here. He's going around our camera here, and I'm getting cut off here, left and right. Okay, I'm going to ask everybody to just go around here. This is live television. As you see it, it's somewhat chaotic, but that's the way things work. Robert Stackler, that was the man you were just hearing. Pete Rose's lawyer, the man who argued successfully to get the temporary restraining order, the man who hammered away at the letter that Bart Giamatti had written to the letter that John Dowd had written to Judge Rubin on behalf of Bart Giamatti, signed by Bart Giamatti, saying that Ron Peters, the chief accuser of Pete Rose, had told the truth. Ron Peters said that he was Pete Rose's principal bookie. Robert Stackler argued that that letter, which Judge Rubin was given from Bart Giamatti believing him, saying the hearing Monday could not be fair because Bart Giamatti was prejudiced, has made up his mind. Well, Judge Nadel agreed, and that's why this thing has been put off for a couple of weeks. This is Jeff Hirsh live at the courthouse, and Jerry, I must say, in the melee and the crowd crush, I've lost my audio, so if you want to ask me a question, give me 2 or 3 minutes to hook myself up and then come back to me. This is Jeff Hirsh live at the courthouse.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. He gets hazard pay for that type of thing. Now, we were speaking with an expert in sports law. Let's go back to that.
Ed, sorry for the interruption. You can understand what's going on today. 2 things strike me as being pretty interesting in this. The first is, up to now, we have constantly heard that this hearing is about whether or not Giamatti can be objective, whether he can be fair. But what Judge Nadel was saying is that now comes the hearing 14 days from now, or July 6th, actually, 10 days from now. In that hearing, the issue, for the first time, we are going to hear from Giamatti. We're going to hear from Pete Rose, because in this kind of a hearing, they can bring in the evidence. This may be the most dramatic of all.
I'm sure it is, but I'm not absolutely sure what you're saying is the way it's going to happen. Are we talking still about the issue of whether or not Giamatti has prejudged the case?
Yes, but
rather than whether or not Pete is guilty or innocent.
That's right, but now in determining whether or not Bart Giamatti can be a fair judge, they are going to talk about the kind of evidence that Bart Giamatti has in front of him and whether or not that was deduced fairly. in that kind of a case, they may have to bring Bart Giamatti to the stand. In other words, Judge Nadel may well say, okay, the only way I can find out if Bart Giamatti is going to be fair is if I can face him eye to eye and look at him and ask him these questions. Well, once Bart Giamatti starts bringing up some of the issues in this particular case, then it seems the door has been opened. And we, just as Bill Cunningham had said, we may very well see the issues joined in this preliminary injunction.
Well, as he's indicated, the hearing can be open to a full evidentiary hearing, so that, yes, Pete would be required to submit to cross-examination and things of that sort at that point.
One of the things you were talking about before the hearing started, and you turned out to be exactly right on, is the judge ultimately made his decision. In fact, his very first sentence almost seemed to be what we were talking about. He concluded at this point, without judging Pete Rose, whether or not he gambled or not, he determined that a 2-week delay would not irreparably harm Major League Baseball. But without granting the order, it could irreparably harm Pete Rose.
Well, because Rose would be subjected to lifetime suspension, a lifetime sentence. You cannot be associated with football, with baseball again, and that would never be put aside.
Has Judge Nadel opened up the floodgates? Has he created new law in his decision?
No, because these things have happened before, much as the Baseball Commission likes to pretend that these types of proceedings have never been interfered with in the past. They have.
Do you see this as more than a hometown decision? Is there any legal basis for what Nadel ruled?
I had sat through the 2 days of hearings, and I was convinced that Dowd's report was very much biased in favor of getting Pete off the field.
Why do you reach that conclusion?
He summarizes all of his evidence in the first 6 pages and concludes, in essence, that Pete was guilty of betting on baseball and Pete was guilty of betting on the Reds. Okay. And then he goes on to explain that in the next 219 pages.
Okay. There are people sitting at home that say, gosh, I've loved Pete all my life, greatest thing going, but their fingerprints on a betting sheet, wouldn't that prove it? What's wrong with that evidence?
Well, if they only have Pete's fingerprints on there, how did they get on there, and why aren't there anybody else's fingerprints on there? The person who supposedly took that information from Pete's house would have to have had his fingerprints on the document also, unless he did it without, had done something in advance, put on a pair of gloves to avoid his fingerprints showing up on that particular document.
So, in conclusion, you find that Judge Nadel's decision has merit?
I feel it does, yes.
Okay. Ed Garland, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mama.
For those of you that have joined us late, let's reiterate what's going on here. What we're going to do now is 23 or 24 minutes ago, Judge Nadel rendered his decision. You would probably like to hear that again, so here it is.
Accordingly, I here today grant Peter Edward Rose's motion for a temporary restraining order. The action I have taken here today has the following ramifications during the term of the temporary order, which is 14 days. Number 1, Peter Edward Rose will not have a hearing tomorrow before the Commissioner of Baseball. Number 2, no disciplinary action of any type may be taken against Mr. Rose for 14 days. Number 3, Mr. Rose will remain as manager of the Cincinnati Reds in their employment for the next 14 days.
So this latest chapter in the Pete Rose controversy is now over, or perhaps should I say just beginning, and of course our coverage of it is just beginning as well. We're going to be getting reaction from Pete. He's at the ballpark today.
And there's some poetry in that, because today is Old Timers Day, so Pete is spending a lot of time being with the people that were with him playing as part of his career. He at least has 2 more weeks as manager of the Cincinnati Reds. Now in 2 weeks, Judge Nadel will decide if he will issue a permanent injunction. So stay tuned for News 5 for complete reports as this story continues to develop.
And that is our special report for now. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm Norma Rashid.
And I'm Jerry Springer. For more news, tune in at 6 o'clock. Good afternoon.